Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. Today we're reviewing the third full-length album from English pop group 1975, entitled A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. Now, I honestly wasn't sure what I was going to think about this album. There were some really great teaser tracks like Love It If We Made It, and there were some really bad ones like Two Time. And I was honestly really surprised with how great this album really is. Now, granted, it does get off to a very shaky start. I mean, we have the 1975, which is the opening little cut on this album, which is an alright, heavily auto-tuned introduction. Nothing really to go home about, nothing really to cry over either. Followed by a few really weak tracks, starting off with Give Yourself a Try. And this one had a lot of pop appeal to it. And despite any positive sentiment that I can appreciate through the lyrics of self-love and positivity towards oneself, it has a very grating guitar riff in the background that makes it a very difficult pill to swallow as far as the song goes. And after that we have Two Time, and this song is frankly horrible. This song is horrible. We have surprisingly awful vocals, especially on an album where the vocals are one of the strongest points. A really bland, really boring, really generic beat that's just so blatantly unimpressive that this song is more than a chore to sit through. It has nothing lyrics to it, and any gleam of interest you can gain from the lyrics is just crushed down to a fine powder by the absolute horrendous nature of every other element that makes up this song. And after that we get How to Draw / Petrichor. And this song has some interesting ideas on it. It has some unique melodies to it, but honestly they're just not all that impressively done. They're pretty forgettable. They're not necessarily generic, they're not necessarily bland, they just fail to leave any sort of impact. And that's probably the worst crime that something like this can commit. It just fails to resonate in one's mind or in one's heart, because it just is that unimpressive. So, once you get through that opening, you get a really great album, where it starts off with the song Love It If We Made It, which is an absolutely phenomenal song. I love every single detail of this. It is so well written. It's the perfect, almost pessimistic anthem, just going over how screwed up society really is. And it's kind of like, you know what? If we could make it out, I'd love that. I'd love it if we make it. But looking at the world, it just doesn't seem like it's going to go that way. And it conveys this in a really fun way, almost. I mean, the whole idea of, like, I'm trying to think of the right verbiage. Truth is only hearsay. Paternity has failed us. Love it if we made it. Like, this whole idea of just how society has failed us. But we're going to power through with this amazing, infectiously catchy, really well-made beat, incredible vocal performance filled with so much passion and emotion that you just can't help but love every single second of this song. And we have Be My Mistake, which does Ed Sheeran better than Ed Sheeran does Ed Sheeran, which is very interesting. I can see why this may not resonate with a lot of people, but I found it pretty sweet, pretty endearing. I enjoyed this track a good amount. Sincerity is Scary is an interesting track because on its own as a single before the album release, I didn't find it all that impressive, honestly. But in the context of this album, it's hard to place why exactly, but it becomes honestly a great track. The whole the choir-esque hook of why can't we be friends when we are lovers is just so infectious. And the trumpets, even though they aren't necessarily incredible, they feel so much more well done, despite being the exact same song. It's a really perplexing thing. Listening to it in the album makes it sound so much better than listening to it on its own. I actually love this track on the album, but it's one that when I first heard it as a single, I was less than impressed, but I found myself loving Sincerity is Scary. And granted, after that first few blunders, there is one more blunder on the album, and that's I Like America and America Likes Me. I don't think this song is horrible, honestly. Has a kind of pretty forgettable, almost dubstep EDM-esque bass drop in the chorus, and I don't think it's honestly all that poorly done. But I mean, with all the other creative, interesting, varied styles throughout this album, this bland, generic pop attempt is pretty much just left in the dust by everything around it. It honestly, the worst thing about it is that it just can't live up to the greatness surrounding it. Especially when you have the impressive, funny, interesting, and frankly sad spoken word segment of The Man Who Married a Robot love theme. And this tells the account of someone whose best friend is the internet, and they tell the internet everything about them because they love the internet and they think that the internet loves them. And this plays really strong into the prevailing themes of loneliness and isolation that plague this album. And even though that may sound very depressing, it honestly doesn't sound all that depressing on the album itself. In a lot of ways, it acknowledges, you know what, I may not be able to find love. I may not be able to do this, but that's okay. I can live through that. And this album does a really great job of conveying that. And even though you do have really sad moments like this, and the closing track, I Always Want to Die Sometimes, which is a very powerful closing track that really encompasses these themes in a really amazing way, in such a beautiful ending to an album. Like, this is how you end an album. That's how you end an album. But they encompass these themes really well, while also having some sweet love songs that show that maybe not all hope is lost, where it's not living if it's not with you, which has this really catchy 80s synth-esque beat to it. Like, I swear if this came out back in the 80s, this would have been a massive hit. And it honestly, despite that, doesn't feel all that outdated. It still works today as its own song. I found myself really enjoying this one and the message behind it. And then we have a few really good tracks. We have Surrounded by Heads and Bodies, which has a really nice, simplistic beat to it. It has some really nice, soft, sweet instrumentals that you can just easily move along with without having to think too hard about it. It's a nice, relaxing track on the album. Followed by the really fun, jazzy Mine, which has some nice, really interesting elements to the hook. Like I said, it has a lot of heavy jazz influence, yet another interesting instrumental that's unlike everything else, yet still manages to merge itself well together in the entire record. And I really enjoyed this song, and I couldn't be more in love. You just can't listen to this without singing along with the hook. The hook is so amazing. And, gosh, I just love the hook on that song so much. I mean, everything else about it I enjoy a lot too, but God, I can't listen to that without singing along with it. You cannot listen to I Couldn't Be More in Love without singing along to the hook. I don't see how you can do that. So, I mean, overall, this is a great album. I mean, with standout tracks like Inside Your Mind, which has a really great electronic sound in the chorus, to the really soft and sweet songs like Be My Mistake, to the really upbeat fun songs like Love It If We Made It. This song encompasses a large amount of different variety, and it does this all in a really great way. This was a very impressive album that I enjoyed quite a bit. And honestly, if it weren't for the very, very weak opening few tracks to this, I would have loved this album. And unfortunately, I can't ignore the horrible tracks at the very beginning of it. So, with that being said, I enjoyed this album significantly. I really did. If I listen to it, I usually am going to start with right after How to Draw. I just skip everything from there and prior. But as the album as a whole, I'm feeling a strong 7. Definitely check this one out. This is a very good listen. It's very interesting. It's a fun, easy to get into pop record with a lot of different sounds to it. And so, make sure to tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.